The Galactic Confederation had standards, very high standards. Standards so lofty that most species didn't even qualify for membership until they'd mastered faster-than-light travel, eliminated all civil conflicts, and developed at least 3 varieties of dessert that didn't involve refined sugar. It was an exclusive club, and like all exclusive clubs, its members enjoyed nothing more than looking down on the riffraff trying to get in. Humanity was definitely riffraff. Humans, Ambassador Vexlor said, his 7 eye stalks quivering with poorly disguised contempt. They still think coffee is an acceptable breakfast. The Confederation's High Council chamber fell silent. Several delegates gasped. A Zoloxian representative in the back fainted dramatically, though that might have been because they'd forgotten to hydrate their gill sacks again. High Chancellor Drosna, whose 12,000-year-old species had evolved beyond the need for anything as primitive as patience, tapped her ceremonial gavel. We have reviewed the application for provisional membership from the species known as humans. As is tradition, we must assign them an impossible task. The chamber erupted in chittering laughter. The impossible task was the Confederation's favorite joke, a diplomatic way to reject unworthy species by giving them a challenge that would take any reasonable civilization at least 3 centuries to complete. The current record was held by the Andromaxians, who had completed their task building a quantum-entangled communications network spanning their entire solar system in just 278 years. What shall we assign these humans? Drosna asked, pronouncing the word like someone had just handed her a dead fish. Make them solve the Praxian equations, suggested a delegate. Wouldn't do. No, they'd just use their primitive computers and stumble onto a solution by accident, replied another. Ambassador Vexlor's eye stalks perked up. I have the perfect task. Let's send them to Mars. The room went quiet again. Mars? Their neighboring planet? That's hardly impressive, scoffed Drosna. Not just visit Mars, Vexlor clarified, his mouth parts curving into what passed for a smile in his species. Let's have them build a self-sustaining colony there, and within 1 Earth year. This time, the laughter nearly brought down the ceiling ornaments. Even the normally stoic Drosna permitted herself a chuckle. Everyone knew that terraforming and colony construction at the scale required for self-sustainability was a multi-generational project. The humans would either give up immediately or spend decades failing spectacularly. Excellent suggestion. Drosna declared, we shall inform Earth's representatives immediately, and we should send an observer to document their inevitable failure. That's where I came in. My name is Quizble T'zorp, junior observer for the Galactic Confederation, and, until recently, the most unremarkable member of my species ever to hold the position. I had failed my way upward through the Confederation bureaucracy with a talent for being just competent enough not to get fired. When they needed someone to spend a year watching humans embarrass themselves, I was the obvious choice. Don't worry, my supervisor told me as I packed my observation equipment. All you need to do is record their pathetic attempts. The standard documentation package will suffice. Primitive species failure analysis form 27B. You probably won't even need the appendices. As my ship approached the red planet, I reviewed what the Confederation knew about humans. They had only achieved rudimentary spaceflight about 80 Earth years ago. They had sent a few primitive explorers to Mars, established some small research outposts, but nothing even approaching a colony. Their technology was laughably simple. They still used fossil fuels for Grak's sake. And they spent most of their time making videos of their infant offspring and furry companions to share on what they called the internet. I was prepared for boredom. I was prepared for failure. I was prepared for everything except what actually happened. I was decidedly not prepared for humans. My observation pod touched down on the Martian surface 3 days before the human expedition was scheduled to arrive. I established my camouflaged monitoring station on a ridge overlooking the designated colony site, a vast, empty plain near the northern pole with absolutely nothing recommending it besides slightly higher than average water content in the soil. I settled in with my nutrient packets and entertainment feeds, ready for a year of watching humans bumble around in the dust before giving up. When the first human ships appeared in the thin Martian atmosphere, I nearly choked on my nutrient paste. There weren't one or two exploratory vessels as expected. There were 17. 17 massive, ungainly things that looked like they'd been cobbled together from spare parts which, as I would later learn, many of them had been. Observer log, Day 1. The humans have sent what appears to be every space-worthy vessel they possess. This is either admirable commitment or profound stupidity. I'm leaning toward the latter. The first ship to land was emblazoned with the words Mars Express in garish red letters. As the dust settled, a hatch opened, and a human in an environmental suit bounded down a ramp with all the grace of a drunken Plutonian mud flopper. The human planted a flag. Humans were obsessed with planting flags, and then did something unexpected. They turned around and mooned the camera on their own ship. I would later learn this was Commander Jack Thompson, the expedition leader, who had won a bet with his pilot about who would be the first to, quote, show their ass to Mars. The other ships landed in quick succession, disgorging humans and equipment in what appeared to be complete chaos. There was shouting, laughing, at least 3 minor collisions, and what I'm fairly certain was an impromptu dance competition. Observer log. Day 1. Supplemental. The humans appear to have no organization whatsoever. They're treating this like some sort of recreational activity. I've counted at least 5 instances of what might be mating rituals but are more likely just humans high-fiving each other. By the end of the first day, the humans had established nothing more than a circle of landed ships and a few temporary habitats. I sent my first report back to the Confederation, predicting total mission failure within a month. The next day, things got worse or better, depending on your perspective. The humans held what they called a planning meeting, which seemed to consist mostly of arguing, drawing crude diagrams in the Martian soil, and consuming alarming amounts of a stimulant beverage they called coffee. I focused my audio receptors on a group that seemed to be in charge, if anyone was in charge of this mess. Look, Thompson, your original design is garbage, said a compact female human with curly red hair that kept escaping her environmental suit helmet. This was Dr. Ellie Burke, their chief engineer. We can't just build outward from a central hub. This is Mars, not a shopping mall. Shopping malls are efficiently designed, Commander Thompson responded, clearly offended. Is selling overpriced clothing? Sure, Dr. Burke snapped back, not for housing 3,000 people on a planet that wants to kill you. Another human, a tall male with dark skin who moved with unusual precision, intervened. Both of you, shut up. The colony layout isn't the issue. The issue is time. This was Dr. Marcus Reed, their logistics coordinator. We have 365 days to build something that should take decades. So we'll work faster. Thompson shrugged. That's your solution to everything, Jack. Burke rolled her eyes. Work faster. As if we can just tell the laws of physics to hurry up. Actually, a fourth human chimed in, a younger male with what appeared to be deliberately messy hair. I might have an idea about that. This was Leo Nakamura, their systems specialist and, as I would discover, the most dangerous human of all the kind that thinks sideways. As they continued bickering, I updated my log, Observer log, Day 2, the humans are already fighting amongst themselves. At this rate, they'll be requesting evacuation by the end of the week. I couldn't have been more wrong. By the end of the second day, without apparent agreement or formal planning, the humans had somehow established clear work zones, had begun foundation excavation for several large structures, and assembled a small army of robots that they'd brought along. The robots were primitive by Confederation standards, little more than mobile platforms with basic manipulators and limited AI, but there were hundreds of them. And the humans used them in ways that made absolutely no sense until, suddenly they did. Observer log, Day 3. The humans are exhibiting behaviors that contradict all known sociological models. They argue constantly yet work in perfect synchronization. They follow no discernible hierarchy yet know exactly who should do what. They take actions that appear counterproductive until, hours later, those actions reveal themselves as necessary preparations for subsequent steps. It's almost as if. I paused my recording, reluctant to voice the thought even to myself. It was almost as if they knew exactly what they were doing. Ridiculous notion. These were humans, the same species that had once tried to determine if a taco could be classified as a sandwich. By the end of the first week, I was beginning to question everything the Confederation had told me about humans. A colony site, which had been empty Martian desert, now featured deep foundation trenches for what appeared to be at least 20 major structures. Massive 3D printing robots crawled along these trenches, extruding layer after layer of a material the humans called Marscrete, a concrete-like substance made from Martian soil mixed with specialized binding agents. Observer log, Day 7. The humans have developed construction materials that utilize local resources. This technique was not listed in their technological capabilities profile. Either our intelligence is severely outdated, or they've made a significant breakthrough since our last assessment. I zoomed in on a group of humans who were supervising a particularly large excavation. Dr. Burke was arguing with Leo Nakamura again, but this time about something called the MacGyver Protocol. "We can't just keep MacGyvering solutions, Leo," Burke shouted over the noise of the equipment. "Why not? It's working so far," Nakamura replied with a grin. "Because eventually we'll run into a problem we can't solve with duct tape and optimism." That's what they said about getting to Mars in the first place, and yet here we are. I had to look up MacGyver in my cultural database. Apparently it referred to an ancient human entertainment program about a human who solved complex problems with simple tools and scientific knowledge. The Confederation cultural analysts had classified it as aspirational fiction, not representative of actual human capabilities. Yet here they were, MacGyvering away. By the end of the second week, the foundations were complete, and the first walls were rising. What had initially appeared to be random patterns now clearly showed the outlines of an interconnected network of structures, habitats, research facilities, hydroponic gardens, and something the humans kept referring to as the pub, which seemed to generate unusual excitement. Observer log, Day 14. Construction progress continues at an inexplicable pace. The humans work in shifts, seemingly never stopping. They've developed a modular building system that allows components to be assembled in parallel. Most concerning of all, they appear to be enjoying themselves. That was perhaps the most confusing aspect. The humans treated this supposed to be impossible task as if it was some kind of group recreational activity. They held competitions to see which team could assemble habitat modules fastest. They painted personalized markings on the robots. They blasted what they called music from speakers, mostly something called 80s rock and construction jams. By day 21, I was beginning to suspect a fundamental error in the Confederation's understanding of humans. The colony now had a fully functional central hub connected to 5 radiating arms of structures. The hub contained life support systems, communal areas, and command centers. The arms housed specialized facilities including scientific laboratories, agricultural zones, manufacturing units, and yes, the pub. Observer log, Day 21. The humans have completed approximately 17% of the necessary structures for a viable colony, putting them significantly ahead of any projected timeline. They employ a method they call parallel processing, where multiple teams work on different components simultaneously without centralized oversight. Their approach appears chaotic but achieves results that would require meticulous planning in any Confederation species. I focused my sensors on Commander Thompson, who was conducting what the humans called a site tour for a group of their specialists. "As you can see," Thompson said, gesturing at the half-completed dome behind him, "we're ahead of schedule on the main agricultural facility. Burke's team has modified the soil processing to work at triple the expected rate." "That's because we ignored the manual," Dr. Burke interjected. "The manual said the processors couldn't handle more than 40 cubic meters per hour, Thompson explained. "And now they handle 120, Burke said with obvious pride. "Turns out the manual was written by lawyers, not engineers." "Won't that burn them out faster?" asked one of the specialists. Burke shrugged. "Sure, in about 3 months. But by then we'll have processed all the soil we need and can use the processors for spare parts." This concept deliberately using equipment beyond its specified limitations with full knowledge it would fail, but only after its primary purpose was fulfilled, was alien to Confederation thinking. Our technology was designed to last for generations. The idea of planned obsolescence as a feature rather than a flaw was unsettling. Even more unsettling was watching Leo Nakamura's systems team. They had set up what they called a hackathon to solve the colony's communications infrastructure issues. Observer log, day 28. The humans have organized a competition to solve technical problems. They've divided into teams, provided themselves with stimulants, primarily coffee and something called energy drinks, and issued challenges to each other. They appear to believe that competition will lead to better solutions than cooperation. Surprisingly, they may be correct. By the end of the first month, the colony had a functioning power grid based on a combination of solar arrays and nuclear generators. They had established rudimentary life support systems throughout the central hub. They had begun preliminary atmospheric processing, and I had begun to worry that I might be witnessing the impossible. The crisis came on day 37, without warning. Ours, never a hospitable place to begin with, decided to remind everyone just how much it disliked visitors. A massive dust storm, one of the largest recorded in decades, descended on the colony site with less than 3 hours' notice. Observer log, day 37. A Category 5 dust storm has appeared on the horizon. Based on Confederation models, this will cause catastrophic damage to the incomplete colony structures and likely end the human mission. Atmospheric interference may prevent further logging until the storm passes. I secured my observation pod and prepared for a long wait. The storm would last at least 4 days according to my meteorological instruments. When it passed, I expected to find destruction, demoralization, and possibly the humans preparing to abandon their attempt. What I did not expect was to hear human voices on my communications system in the middle of the storm. Is everyone accounted for? It was Commander Thompson's voice, barely audible through the howling wind. All personnel secured in the central hub and emergency shelters, replied Dr. Reed. No casualties, but we've got structural failures in sectors 3 and 7. Burke, what's the status on the shield? Ready for testing, Dr. Burke responded. But Jack, this is completely theoretical. We've never deployed an electromagnetic dust shield at this scale before. Does it work in the simulation? Thompson asked. Yes, but then we're doing it. Leo, are the power systems ready? Rerouted everything except life support, Nakamura confirmed. We'll have about 20 minutes before the capacitors burn out. 20 minutes might be enough. Hit it. There was a moment of silence, then a sound like distant thunder. Through my sensors, I detected a massive power surge from the colony site. What happened next defied all Confederation engineering principles. The humans had adapted their communication array satellites to generate an electromagnetic field around the colony. The field created a repulsive force that didn't stop the storm but diverted its worst effects away from their key structures. It was crude, improvised, and by all rights shouldn't have worked, but it did, at least partially. Observer log, day 37, emergency update. The humans have implemented some kind of electromagnetic shield technology not listed in their capabilities profile. It appears to be severely straining their power systems, but is providing limited protection from the storm. For the next 3 days, I watched in stunned disbelief as the humans fought the storm with everything they had. When the shield inevitably failed, they switched to manual repairs. Teams in environmental suits ventured out into near-zero visibility to secure loose structures and rescue equipment. When conventional communications failed due to electromagnetic interference, they rigged up a system of colored flares and reflective markers to coordinate their efforts. By all conventional logic, they should have huddled in their shelters and waited for the storm to pass. Instead, they treated one of Mars' deadliest natural phenomena as an inconvenience to be overcome. Observer log, day 40. The dust storm is beginning to subside. Contrary to all predictive models, the colony has survived with approximately 60% of its structures intact, and more significantly, the humans have not only maintained morale but appear to have developed a certain, enthusiasm for their predicament. They're referring to the storm as a good test run and valuable learning experience. I'm beginning to suspect humans may possess psychological abnormalities that the Confederation has misclassified as evolutionary disadvantages. As the dust settled, literally the full extent of the damage became clear. 2 of the 5 habitat arms were severely compromised. The agricultural dome had collapsed entirely. 3 of their major construction robots were damaged beyond repair. By my calculations, the setback had cost them at least 2 months of progress. I expected despair. What I witnessed was a colony-wide meeting that the humans called a pivot party. Commander Thompson stood on an improvised platform, addressing the assembled colonists. "All right, people. Plan A is officially dead. Time for Plan B." "I think we're on Plan Q by now," Dr. Burr called out, generating laughter. "Fair point," Thompson acknowledged. "Whatever letter we're on, here's the situation: we've lost too much to stick with the original colony design. But we've learned something valuable. Building on the surface leaves us vulnerable to storms. So we go underground," Leo Nakamura said, jumping up beside Thompson. "We've already got the excavation equipment for the foundations. We just need to dig deeper." "And much deeper," Dr. Reed added. "And we'll need to completely redesign the life support systems for a subterranean environment." "Can we do it in the time we have left?" someone asked. Thompson looked around at the dust-covered faces of his team. "We don't have a choice. But look at what we've already accomplished. 4 months ago, the idea of building any kind of colony on Mars in a year was considered impossible. Now we're just talking about moving it underground." Observer log, day 41. The humans have abandoned their original construction plan following the storm damage. Rather than attempting repairs, they have decided to fundamentally alter their approach, moving the majority of the colony underground. This decision was reached with minimal debate and near unanimous agreement. It appears that humans, unlike Confederation species, view plans as provisional rather than definitive. They exhibit almost no attachment to previous work when a new direction is required. What followed was what the humans called a montage moment, a period of intense activity compressed into a blur of productivity. The surviving construction robots were reprogrammed for excavation. The damaged habitat modules were cannibalized for materials. New designs were created, tested in simulations, revised, and implemented with dizzying speed. I found myself admiring their resilience despite myself. The Confederation teachings held that primitive species were defined by their attachment to routine and resistance to change. Humans seemed to be the opposite. They thrived on disruption and adaptation. By day 60, just 20 days after the storm, they had carved out a vast underground complex beneath the remains of their surface structures. The new design utilized the natural insulation of the Martian soil to maintain temperature and provide radiation shielding. They had converted their surface solar arrays into a distributed network that channeled energy to the underground facilities. Observer log, day 60. The humans have recovered from the setback with inexplicable speed. Their new underground colony design addresses several fundamental flaws in their original approach. I am beginning to suspect that the dust storm, rather than delaying their progress, may have inadvertently accelerated it by forcing innovation they might not have otherwise attempted. Most disturbing of all, I found myself hoping they would succeed. This was a severe breach of Observer protocol. We were meant to document, not empathize. Yet I couldn't help but root for these bizarre, reckless, impossibly adaptive creatures. Dr. Burke summed it up best during a rare moment of rest, sitting outside the colony entrance watching the Martian sunset with Nakamura and Reed. "You know what's funny?" she said. "If everything had gone according to plan, we probably would have failed." "How do you figure?" Reed asked. "The original design was too complex, too dependent on ideal conditions," Burke explained. "We needed to fail faster to figure out what actually works here." "Humans," Nakamura laughed. "The only species that gets better results by screwing up first." I couldn't have put it better myself. The final phase of the colony construction began on day 270. According to my original mission parameters, This should have been around the time the humans gave up and requested evacuation. Instead, they were ahead of what even they considered a feasible schedule. Observer log, day 270. The underground colony complex is approximately 78% complete. The humans have established 5 interconnected cavern systems housing all critical functions. They have a functioning atmospheric processing plant that is gradually adjusting the internal environment to Earth normal conditions. Most remarkably, they have begun what they call Phase 2 terraforming, a limited environmental modification of the immediate surroundings. The terraforming efforts were modest by Confederation standards, introducing specially engineered microorganisms into the soil near the colony, establishing pressure-controlled gardening zones on the surface, testing various radiation-resistant plants. But for a species that had only achieved spaceflight within the lifetime of some of its still living members, it was extraordinary. Commander Thompson had established what he called the final countdown, a 90-day push to complete all essential systems before the Confederation's deadline. The entire colony operated on a continuous work schedule, with teams rotating through 4-hour shifts around the clock. "We need 3 things," Thompson told the colony leaders during a strategy session I managed to monitor: life support redundancy, food production security, and what the bean counters back home call quality of life infrastructure. Translation: we need to be able to breathe, eat, and not murder each other from boredom, Dr. Burke clarified. "Exactly," Thompson nodded. "Reed, where are we on life support?" "Primary and secondary systems are online," Reed reported. "We're working on the tertiary backup now. Oxygen recycling is at 97% efficiency, which exceeds Earth-based closed systems. Food production? The deep hydroponics are exceeding targets," replied Dr. Yumi Tanaka, their agricultural specialist. "We've got staple crops at sustainable levels and are expanding to supplementary nutrients. We should hit full nutritional self-sufficiency 2 weeks before deadline." "And the psychological considerations?" Leo Nakamura grinned. "The pub is fully operational, sir. We've also completed the virtual reality suite, the cultural center, and the underground park. Still working on the swimming pool, but we've had to prioritize less essential water uses like, drinking." "Swimming is essential for mental health," Thompson insisted. "Find a way to make it happen." Observer log, day 292. The humans continue to allocate significant resources to non-survival elements: recreation, art, social gathering spaces. This appears counterintuitive, but may explain their sustained productivity. Unlike Confederation species who separate work and recreation temporarily, humans seem to require the simultaneous presence of both for optimal functioning. As the deadline approached, the tempo of construction reached what should have been physically impossible levels. The humans had developed a technique they called burst building, concentrating all resources on a single component until completion, then immediately shifting to the next priority. It was inefficient by conventional standards, but allowed them to complete visible portions of the colony in dramatic spurts, which seemed to boost morale. Observer log, day 320. The humans have begun decorating the colony. Not simply marking functional zones or establishing navigational references, but actual aesthetic modifications with no practical purpose. They are painting murals, installing lighting displays, aerating what they call cozy corners. They are acting as if success is inevitable. The most remarkable day came just 2 weeks before the deadline. I had expected a gradual completion of the colony, with systems coming online sequentially as they were finished. Instead, the humans created what they called Revelation Day, a single 24-hour period in which they intended to activate all primary systems simultaneously. "It's a terrible idea from an engineering perspective," Dr. Burke admitted during the planning session. "Sequential activation would allow us to isolate and address any issues individually. But it would take weeks," Thompson countered. "This way we either succeed spectacularly or fail spectacularly, but either way, we know where we stand with time to make adjustments." "It's like ripping off a band-aid," Nakamura added helpfully. "More like juggling chainsaws," Burke muttered. "But fine, a Revelation Day it is." I watched in professional horror and personal awe as they prepared for this engineering abomination. Every system power, life support, water recycling, communications, food production, waste management, and environmental controls would be brought to full operational status within a single Martian day. The potential for cascading failures was enormous. Observer log. Day 351, supplemental. The humans are about to attempt what they call Revelation Day. By all established engineering principles, this approach maximizes risk unnecessarily. However, it is consistent with observed human psychological patterns. They appear to prefer concentrated stress followed by resolution, rather than extended periods of moderate stress. Revelation Day began at dawn, Mars time. Commander Thompson gave a brief speech that ended with the line, "Let's light this candle and see what blows up." This was apparently meant to be encouraging. For the next 16 hours, I witnessed what can only be described as controlled chaos. Teams sprinted between systems, making adjustments, calling out readings, occasionally slapping makeshift repairs onto components that weren't performing to specification. Alarms sounded and were silenced. Warning lights flashed and were sometimes acknowledged, sometimes ignored based on criteria I couldn't discern. By all rights, the colony should have experienced at least one catastrophic failure. The simultaneous strain on all systems virtually guaranteed it, according to Confederation engineering models. Instead, as the Martian sun set, the impossible happened. One by one, system status indicators turned green, power stabilized. Atmospheric composition reached Earth normal parameters. Water recycling achieved closed-loop stability. Food production systems reported optimal conditions. The humans had done it. With 2 weeks to spare, they had created a self-sustaining colony on Mars. Their celebration defied description. There was weeping, shouting, embracing, and what appeared to be spontaneous dancing. Someone produced musical instruments. Someone else broke out containers of a liquid they called the good stuff, saved for a special occasion. The pub became the center of festivities that lasted well into the Martian night. Observer log. Day 351. Final entry. The human colony is operational. All critical systems are functioning within parameters that meet or exceed the requirements established by the Confederation's challenge. They have completed the impossible task in approximately half the allotted time. I am at a loss to explain how. As I finalized my report that night, I spotted Commander Thompson, Dr. Burke, and Leo Nakamura sitting on a ridge outside the colony entrance, sharing a bottle and looking up at the stars. "Do you think they'll actually let us into their fancy club now?" Burke asked. "No chance," Thompson laughed. "They'll come up with some reason why this doesn't count. Probably claim we cheated," Nakamura added. "Not our fault. They don't understand how humans work." To human ingenuity, Thompson raised the bottle. May it always confuse the hell out of superior aliens. They had no idea I was listening, but I found myself agreeing with the sentiment all the same. The Confederation High Council chamber was silent as they reviewed my final report. I stood at attention, trying not to fidget under the collective gaze of the galaxy's most powerful beings. High Chancellor Drozna spoke first. "Observer T'zorp, are you certain of the accuracy of this report? You claim the humans completed the impossible task in 351 Earth days." "Yes, Chancellor. All my observations are verified by sensor logs and continuous monitoring." "And they achieved self-sustainability?" Ambassador Vexlor asked, his eye stalks rigid with disbelief. "Complete self-sustainability across all required metrics," I confirmed. "Their life support systems are stable. Food production exceeds caloric requirements, and they have established a functional societal structure." "This is unprecedented," Drozna murmured. "The previous record for an impossible task was 278 years, not days." "Perhaps there was a mistake in task assignment," suggested a Xyloxian delegate. "Building a Mars colony may not have been sufficiently impossible for this species." "The parameters were clear," Vexlor snapped. "No species at their technological level should have been able to establish a self-sustaining colony on a hostile planet in less than a generation, let alone a single year." "And yet," I said, then immediately regretted speaking out of turn. Drozna's crystalline eyes focused on me. "You have additional insights." "Observer T'zorp?" I hesitated, then decided that having witnessed the impossible, I could afford to be a bit impossible myself. Chancellor, I believe the Confederation fundamentally misunderstands humans. The chamber erupted in chittering protests. Drosna silenced them with a wave of her hand to explain. Our models assess species based on technological advancement, social harmony, and resource efficiency, I said. Humans score poorly on all three by our metrics. Their technology is primitive and inconsistent. Their society is chaotic and fractious. Their resource usage is wildly inefficient. These are facts, not misunderstandings, Vexlaw pointed out. Yes, but we've interpreted these traits as weaknesses when, for humans, they may be strengths, I explained. Their technological inconsistency stems from prioritizing innovation over refinement. Their social chaos creates competition that drives rapid development. Their inefficiency allows for redundancy and adaptability. Example. I called up a holographic display showing the colony's construction timeline, highlighting the dust storm crisis and subsequent redesign. When faced with a catastrophic setback, they didn't simply recover, they improved. The storm destroyed their surface structures, so they built underground, which proved superior. Our species would have spent years debating the optimal design before beginning construction. Humans started building immediately, knowing their first attempts would be flawed but counting on their ability to adapt and improve through iteration. Are you suggesting, Drosna said slowly, that inefficiency, disorder, and imperfection are advantages? For humans, yes. They don't achieve perfection, they achieve functionality, then improve incrementally while already operating. It's messy, wasteful, and apparently incredibly effective. The council chambers buzzed with uneasy discussion. This violated every principle of Confederation evolutionary theory. Species were supposed to advance by becoming more orderly, more efficient, more logical. Humans seem to be evolving through chaos. If what you say is true, Vexlaw said reluctantly, we may need to reconsider their provisional membership application. I believe that would be wise, I agreed. However, there's something else you should know. I displayed my final observation, a communication I had intercepted just before leaving Mars. It was from Earth's United Space Administration to Commander Thompson. Congratulations on Mars success. Stop Venus colony project approved. Stop estimated timeline 8 months. Stop. The council chamber erupted again, this time in what I can only describe as panic. Venus? Drosna exclaimed. They're attempting Venus next? That's a death world. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush any habitation they could build. I believe, I said carefully, they would take that as a challenge, not a deterrent. After much debate, the Confederation made an unprecedented decision. Rather than requiring humans to complete another impossible task for full membership, they approved their application immediately with a special clause granting the Confederation oversight of human expansion projects. Not because we think they'll fail, Drosna explained to the Council, but because we're afraid they'll succeed too quickly for the stability of the galactic order. My final act as observer was to deliver this news to Earth personally. I met with their planetary council, a chaotic assembly that made the Confederation look positively streamlined by comparison, and presented the membership certificate. We are pleased to welcome humanity to the Galactic Confederation, I said formally. Your achievement on Mars has demonstrated your species' worthiness. That's great, said the head of their council, barely glancing at the certificate. But we're really more interested in your oversight clause. Does this mean you'll be providing technical assistance for our Venus project? Technical assistance? I stammered. Yes, we assume you have experience with hostile environment colonization. Our teams are eager to learn from your expertise. It took me a moment to process what was happening. They didn't view Confederation oversight as a restriction, they saw it as getting access to our technology and knowledge. I will convey your interest to the High Council, I managed. As I prepared to leave, I found Commander Thompson waiting by my ship. He had been recalled to Earth as a hero and was now heading up the Venus project planning team. So, you were watching us the whole time, he said. It wasn't a question. I was assigned as observer. Yes, I admitted. And they thought we'd fail. They were certain of it. Thompson grinned. Want to know a secret? So were we. Then why attempt it at all? I asked. Thompson looked up at the night sky, where Mars glowed as a faint red dot, because we needed to know if we could, because every expert said it would take decades, and we wanted to prove them wrong. He paused. Because it's what humans do. I considered this. You risk failure, knowing it's likely just to see if you might succeed. Exactly. He smiled. The Martian colony almost failed a dozen times. But here's what your Confederation doesn't understand: humans don't see failure as the end. We see it as data. Data? Each failure teaches us something new. We try, we fail, we learn, we adapt, we try again faster each time. It's messy and inefficient, but it works for us. And Venus? I couldn't help asking. Your scientists must know the challenges are orders of magnitude greater than Mars. Thompson's eyes lit up with what I now recognized as the distinctive human expression of enthusiastic recklessness. Oh, absolutely. Crushing atmospheric pressure, sulfuric acid clouds, surface temperatures that could melt lead. It's completely hostile to life as we know it. Yet you seem excited by this prospect. Of course. Don't you see? It's impossible. He emphasized the word with obvious relish, which means when we do it anyway, we'll have learned something revolutionary. I felt a chill run through my sensory appendages. Commander Thompson, may I ask you something directly? Shoot. Is there any challenge the Confederation could present that your species would consider truly impossible? A task you would refuse to attempt? He thought for a moment, then laughed. Probably not. We'd at least try to figure out if there was a workaround. As I prepared my ship for departure, I made one final observation entry. The Confederation has misunderstood humans in a more fundamental way than I initially reported. We assumed their chaotic nature was an evolutionary stage they would outgrow. I now believe it is their defining characteristic and their greatest strength. They do not achieve great things despite their imperfections. They achieve them because of those imperfections. Their hunger for the impossible drives them forward at a pace that defies all predictive models. I added a recommendation. The Confederation should not attempt to oversee human expansion. Instead, we should learn from it. Their approach to problems, this try, fail, learn, adapt cycle contains wisdom our methodical species have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection. 6 standard cycles later, I found myself once again standing before the High Council, this time as the newly appointed Human Affairs Liaison. The mood in the chamber was markedly different, tense, but with an undercurrent of excitement I had never before detected in these ancient halls. The humans have submitted their Venus colony blueprint for review, I reported. They're calling it Project Icarus. An ominous name, Vexlor noted. In their mythology, didn't Icarus perish when he flew too close to the sun? They're aware of the irony, I replied. They find it motivating. I displayed the technical specifications, floating habitats suspended in the upper Venusian atmosphere, where temperatures and pressures were surprisingly Earth-like. Automated mining operations on the surface, controlled remotely from the floating cities. Massive atmospheric processes designed to gradually over centuries transform Venus's deadly carbon dioxide blanket into something more hospitable. Chancellor Drosner seemed at a loss for words. Ambitious? I suggested. Insane, she corrected. The engineering challenges alone would take our species a millennium of research. They expect to launch within 8 months, I reminded her. And based on my observations of the Mars project, I believe they will. How do they intend to protect these floating habitats from the sulfuric acid clouds? Asked the Xyloxian delegate. They don't, I said. Their materials science division has developed an acid-resistant coating that actually harvests energy from chemical reactions with the sulfuric compounds. The more acidic the environment, the more power they generate. The council chamber fell silent. We've received 17 patent applications from human researchers in the past month alone, I continued. Their work on the Venus project has already yielded technological advances in atmospheric chemistry, high-pressure engineering, and extreme environment robotics that our scientists believe may have applications for at least 36 Confederation worlds previously considered uninhabitable. Chancellor Drosner's crystalline eyes focused intently on me. Observer T'zorp. Forgive me, Liaison T'zorp. What exactly are you proposing? The oversight clause was a mistake, I said bluntly. We should not be restricting human expansion. We should be facilitating it. I propose a joint venture program, Confederation resources and stability combined with human innovation and adaptability. That would violate countless protocols, Vexlor objected. Yes, I agreed. Just as humans violate countless natural limitations we once thought immutable. Perhaps it's time we learn to be a little more impossible. I stood with Commander Thompson, now Director Thompson of the Interstellar Colonization Initiative, on the observation deck of Aphrodite Station, watching the sunset through Venus's swirling clouds. From this floating metropolis 55 kilometers above the surface, the view was spectacularly beautiful. The atmospheric processes are ahead of schedule, Thompson informed me. Carbon dioxide levels have dropped 2% already. The surface temperature has decreased by 3 degrees. Only 462 degrees to go, I noted wryly, having picked up some human humor over the years. Thompson laughed. We'll get there. Maybe not in our lifetime, but someday my great-grandchildren might walk on Venus's surface wearing nothing more protective than a breathing mask. Below us, robotic mining operations continued day and night, extracting rare minerals and metals that had revitalized Earth's technology sector. The Venusian colony wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, with a population of nearly 12,000 humans and 28 Confederation advisors, including myself. The Europa submarine habitats are ready for deployment next month, Thompson said casually, referring to the underwater colonies planned for Jupiter's ice-covered moon. And the Titan team thinks they've solved the methane precipitation problem. I shook my head in amazement. When the Confederation gave humans that first impossible task, we truly believed it would keep your species occupied for generations. Instead, it just gave us ideas. Thompson grinned. You know what the funny thing is? If you'd just invited us to join without testing us, we probably would have been content with Mars for decades. The impossible task had been designed as a filter, a way to slow humanity's admission to the galactic community until they had matured as a species. Instead, it had catalyzed their development, challenging them to achieve what they might otherwise never have attempted. The High Council has a new designation for Earth, I told him. You're officially classified as an accelerator species, Al. One that drives innovation throughout the Confederation. I like the sound of that. Thompson gazed out at the Venusian sunset, its light filtered through layers of clouds into spectacular bands of orange and purple. What's the next impossible thing we should try? I hesitated, then decided to share the information the Council had been debating for months. There's a planet orbiting Proxima Centauri, tidally locked, with one side permanently facing the star burning hot and the other side in perpetual darkness and cold. The narrow habitable band between them experiences constant hurricane force winds. Sounds perfect, Thompson said without a trace of sarcasm. We'll call it Project Janus, the Two-Faced God. As we watched the sun disappear beyond Venus's horizon, I reflected on how much had changed. The Confederation had existed for 50,000 years, spreading cautiously among the stars, colonizing only the most hospitable worlds, and advancing through careful incremental improvements. Then came the humans, who looked at a deadly planet and saw not an insurmountable obstacle but a challenge to overcome, a puzzle to solve. Who measured success not by avoiding failure but by learning from it. Whose chaotic, inefficient, wildly ambitious nature had, in just 10 years, accelerated Confederation technological development more than the previous century. You know, Thompson said thoughtfully, we've always wondered if we were alone in the universe. Turns out we weren't. But I sometimes wonder if we're still searching for something. What would that be? I asked. He smiled. Someone who can keep up.